tried to expose Diddy, but he threatened to kill me. I know all of Diddy's secrets. I even know where he buried the dead bodies, but I am not involved with.
On March 28, 2016, in the heart of Manhattan, Diddy's sprawling mansion pulsed with the kind of opulence that defined his empire. Crystal chandeliers casting prisms across marble floors, A-list celebrities mingling with champagne flutes in hand, and a bass-heavy soundtrack that drowned out the city's hum. But beneath the glamour, hidden cameras, silent, unblinking, captured a sequence so chilling it would later silence a courtroom. Young women, some barely out of their teens, ushered upstairs by handlers, their faces etched with uncertainty, returning hours later, if at all, with hollow eyes and unsteady steps. The bombshell that would detonate this trial, however, wasn't the footage itself, verified though it was by forensic experts. It was its origin, not Diddy's own security system, but a server belonging to SC Enterprises, Jay-Z's corporate fortress, thrusting one music titan into the shadow of another's downfall. As the prosecution unveiled this grainy, time-stamped video on a quiet morning in a New York courthouse, the room didn't just hush, it froze, as if time itself had paused to witness the unraveling of an empire. Diddy sat at the defense table, his tailored suit pristine, but his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on some invisible point, while his legal team whispered urgently, their faces betraying a panic they couldn't voice. The video played on a screen lowered from the ceiling, its black and white images flickering like a silent film from a bygone era, yet its impact was anything but dated. The footage showed a lavish foyer, guests arriving in waves, their laughter echoing, their faces blurred for legal protection, but their status unmistakable. This was a party built on power, a gathering of the untouchable. At the 23-minute mark, the tone shifted. A camera angled from above captured two men near a grand staircase, one unmistakably Diddy, his gestures sharp and deliberate, the other partially obscured by shadow. Their voices were inaudible, but Diddy's hand rose, pointing upward, and a young woman approached, petite, no older than 20, her dress shimmering under the chandelier's glow. Diddy leaned in, whispered something, and handed her off to a man in a dark suit, who escorted her upstairs with a practiced ease that suggested this wasn't his first time. She glanced back once, her eyes wide, then disappeared into the shadows of the second floor. The room didn't gasp, not yet. The footage rolled on, showing 3 more women led upstairs that night, each by different handlers, each with the same hesitant gait, some clutching their purses like lifelines, others wrapping their arms around themselves as if to ward off an unseen chill. At the 41-minute mark, one woman reappeared, descending the stairs alone. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, her steps faltering as she paused at the bottom, scanning the crowd as if searching for someone who wasn't there. She vanished into a hallway, and that was the last the camera saw of her. The footage wasn't violent, not overtly so, but its orchestration was unmistakable, a choreography of power, precision, and silence. When the screen went dark, the courtroom didn't erupt. It imploded, the silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing on every chest in the room. The judge, a veteran of decades on the bench, leaned back in his chair, his glasses reflecting the dim light, his face unreadable but his stillness speaking volumes. Jurors sat motionless, their notepads untouched, their eyes darting between the blank screen and Diddy, who hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, his hands now clenched so tightly his knuckles gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The prosecution, led by a steely-eyed attorney named Marcus Vance, stood with a calm that felt deliberate, almost predatory. "Your Honor," Vance said, his voice cutting through the hush like a blade, "this footage, submitted anonymously through an encrypted channel, has been forensically authenticated and matches the blueprint of Mr. Combs' home security layout. Its metadata traces to an internal server formerly maintained by SC Enterprises. The name, SC Enterprises, landed like a grenade. Whispers rippled through the gallery, reporters scribbling furiously, their pens scratching against notepads like the sound of a storm approaching. SC Enterprises wasn't just any company. It was Jay-Z's corporate empire, a labyrinth of music, media, and tech ventures that had made him untouchable. The implication was seismic. Jay-Z, either directly or through a leak, was tied to evidence now being used against Diddy, his longtime peer, rival, and occasional collaborator. Was Jay-Z a witness, a whistleblower, or something worse? A silent accuser whose own empire might be complicit in the secrets being unearthed? The defense team, led by a high-profile attorney named Evelyn Harper, snapped to their feet, their objections tumbling out in a flurry. "Unauthorized surveillance, chain of custody violations, privacy breaches, this is wildly prejudicial." But the judge, his voice low and firm, overruled them with a single sentence. "If the footage is authentic and relevant, the jury has the right to view it," and so it did. What followed was a parade of testimonies that didn't just build a case, they dismantled a myth, brick by gilded brick. The first to take the stand was Kayla Foster, a former event assistant who had worked for Diddy from late 2015 to early 2017. She was 29 now, her face pale under the courtroom's harsh lights, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the witness box. Her voice cracked as she introduced herself, but when she looked at the jury, something steadied her, as if their eyes were anchors in a storm she'd been weathering for years. "I was there that night," she said, her words slow at first, each one chosen with care. "I saw the girls being taken upstairs. I wasn't allowed on the second or third floors during events, and I was told that any guests who asked to leave early were to be redirected, distracted, or comforted until further notice." The prosecutor Vance leaned forward, his tone gentle but probing. "What do you mean by comforted, Ms. Foster?" Kayla hesitated, her eyes flickering to the floor, then back to the jury. "We were told to offer drinks, hugs, reassurance, tell them everything was fine. If they were crying, bring tissues. If they were angry, tell them their friend was looking for them. We weren't allowed to call Ubers unless given clearance." The courtroom shifted, jurors exchanging glances, one covering her mouth with her hand. "Who gave the clearance?" Vance pressed. Kayla's voice dropped barely above a whisper. "Usually a security team member, but everything went through Sean." The use of Diddy's real name, Sean, felt intimate, accusatory, as if she were stripping away the persona to reveal the man. A juror gasped softly, and Diddy's head tilted ever so slightly, the first movement he'd made since the footage played. "Did you ever see one of the guests reappear after being taken upstairs?" Vance asked. Kayla looked down, her fingers twisting together. "One. She came down crying. She didn't say anything. Her friend had already left. She didn't have her phone. I offered to help her, but my supervisor told me not to interfere." "What did your supervisor say exactly?" Vance's voice was steady, but the question carried the weight of a guillotine. Kayla's eyes welled up, her voice breaking. "Stay out of it, or you're next." The defense objected, hearsay, threat, speculation, but the judge overruled, his gaze lingering on Kayla, as if he too felt the gravity of her words. The courtroom didn't feel like a trial anymore. It felt like a reckoning, a space where truths long buried were clawing their way to the surface. Kayla continued, her voice growing steadier with each sentence, as if unburdening herself was giving her strength. "There was another night, maybe a month later, when a girl was screaming. She wanted to leave, kept saying, 'Get me out of here.' Sean walked by, looked at her, then looked at security and said, 'Fix that.' He didn't yell. He didn't have to." The jury was statue still, not even blinking, their pens frozen above their notepads. "Why are you speaking now?" Vance asked, his tone soft but piercing. Kayla's lip quivered, but she answered without hesitation. "Because I watched that footage, and I realized the cameras had seen everything I couldn't say." The prosecution rested their questions, and the defense, perhaps sensing the futility, declined to cross-examine. Kayla stepped down, her shoulders sagging as if she'd left a piece of herself on the stand, and the courtroom exhaled collectively. Though the tension didn't dissipate, it deepened. Next came the audio evidence, a 26-second clip that felt like a dagger to the heart of the trial. The prosecution had obtained it from a private phone recording, initially dismissed as irrelevant but now verified to match the footage's time frame and location. The lights dimmed again, and this time there was no screen, only sound. The recording began with laughter, glasses clinking, bass-heavy music pulsing through a hallway, then a shift, a muffled voice, female, nervous. "I don't know where she went." Another voice, male, calm. "She's fine. Stay here." Silence, then a whisper, urgent, close to the phone. "Don't go up there, don't. Just trust me." The clip ended abruptly, leaving the courtroom in a void of sound, the kind that follows a thunderclap. The jury looked stunned, their faces pale, their hands gripping their pens as if to steady themselves. Even the defense didn't object. Not yet. The prosecutor did then. Vance, his voice measured but carrying an undercurrent of triumph, said, "Your Honor, we'd like to recall Ms. Foster briefly." Kayla returned, her eyes red but dry, her expression resolute. "Ms. Foster?" Vance began. "The voice at the audio, in the clip we just played, the one saying, 'Don't go up there,' was that you?" Kayla nodded, every eye in the room locked on her. "Yes," she said, her voice clear now, steady now. "That was me." A beat of silence rippled through the gallery, reporters leaning forward, a juror covering her mouth. Kayla continued, unprompted, as if the truth had broken a dam inside her. "I didn't have proof back then. I only had instincts, but that night I saw too much. The girl who was missing, she was later found outside, crying, shoes gone, phone gone. I tried to ask what happened, and she just said, 'I should have listened to you.' I reported it to my supervisor, and 3 days later, I was reassigned to inventory, basement work, no interaction with guests. After that, my access was revoked. I was told my contract was re-evaluated. I never worked another Diddy event again." The courtroom felt less like a trial now, and more like a truth commission, a space where the walls were closing in, not with anger, but with gravity. A juror looked physically ill, her hand pressed to her chest, while another tapped his pen rhythmically, as if trying to process the weight of what he'd heard. The prosecution rested again, and the defense, still reeling, offered no questions. Kayla's testimony, paired with the audio, wasn't just evidence. It was a window into a world where silence was enforced, where warnings were whispered but never heeded, where power dictated who could speak and who would be erased. The prosecution wasn't done. They called Michelle Rivers, a security consultant who had worked Diddy's events from 2014 to 2017. She was in her mid-30s, dressed plainly in a navy blazer, her posture calm, but her eyes carrying a weight that suggested she'd been haunted by what she'd seen. "My name is Michelle Rivers," she began, her voice steady but low, as if she were speaking to herself as much as the court. "I was a contract security consultant hired through a third-party firm to work several private events hosted by Mr. Combs. I was assigned to tech support and surveillance management." The room went still, the implications of her role sinking in. This wasn't a party guest or a low-level staffer. This was an insider, someone who didn't just attend the events but watched the watchers. "I monitored camera feeds, room activity, entry logs," she continued. "My job was to watch, and I watched everything." Her testimony unfolded like a slow avalanche, calm but relentless, each word building toward an inevitable collapse. "I was present during the March 28, 2016 event, the one seen in the video footage. I can confirm that the camera that recorded the upstairs hallway was not part of Diddy's system. It was an auxiliary backup system installed by a guest who had concerns about personal safety." The courtroom shifted, a reporter's pen clattering to the floor, the sound echoing in the silence. "Who was that guest?" Vance asked, though the room already knew the answer. Michelle's voice didn't waver. "Jay-Z." The name wasn't shouted, wasn't emphasized, it was spoken like a fact, and that made it 10 times more powerful. "He didn't tell anyone except his personal bodyguard and one tech specialist. I was that tech." She glanced at the jury, her eyes steady. "I was instructed to keep the feed off the main grid. It would store in an encrypted drive. Only 3 people knew about it." The prosecutor leaned in. "So why is it only surfacing now?" Michelle's jaw tightened, her voice dropping slightly. "Because someone in Jay-Z's circle watched the Diddy trial unfold and realized the footage might save someone's life." The defense erupted, their objections a desperate flurry. Slanderous, irrelevant, speculative, but the judge held up a hand, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Overruled. The jury may hear her testimony in full." Michelle continued, her words measured but heavy. "I saw girls led upstairs, sometimes crying. I saw them come down changed, quieter, disoriented. One time, a girl was brought down unconscious, carried out the back. I flagged the clip, but I was told not to archive it." "Who told you that?" Vance asked. "An associate of Sean Combs, not directly, but the message was clear." She turned to the jury, her voice rising slightly. "I want to be very clear. I never saw him commit violence, but I saw a structure. I saw a system. I saw protocols in place to manage silence." The jury was fully immersed now, no longer evaluating a crime, but witnessing an empire. A world where secrets weren't just kept, but protected. Michelle's testimony ended with a chilling truth. "There were nights I went home and cried because I felt complicit. I was watching people disappear into rooms and come out quieter, emptier, and I told myself I was just doing my job. But this," she pointed to the evidence table, her hand steady, "this is the first time I feel like I'm doing the right thing." The courtroom was still, not with applause or gasps, but with a stillness that said everyone, jury, judge, media, spectators, understood the gravity of what had been said. Diddy remained frozen, his eyes locked on the table, his hands still clenched, his silence no longer a shield but a weight dragging him down. The final nail came with Illa Anderson, an operations assistant from SC Enterprises, currently under federal protection. She was in her late 20s, her face emotionless but alert, her movements precise as she took the stand. "My name is Illa Anderson," she began, her voice calm, methodical, almost clinical. "I was responsible for managing digital access logs and internal storage distribution for encrypted footage archived across multiple enterprise servers between 2015 and 2018. The jury blinked, unsure what to expect from someone whose world revolved around encryption keys and access ports. Then she dropped the bombshell, which includes the hidden camera footage submitted to this court last week. The room went silent, Illa's voice cutting through like a laser. The footage did not come from a random leak. It came from a protected directory accessible only through biometric authorization. Jay-Z, his chief of security, and one ghost-level clearance profile. She paused, her eyes locking on Diddy. That profile was created using a Diddy-linked alias. The room tilted, the implications crashing over the gallery like a wave. "Are you saying Diddy knew about the footage?" Vance asked. Illa nodded, her voice unwavering. He may not have known the footage was being used against him now, but he was aware of the camera's existence. In fact, records show he accessed the encrypted file 2 days after the event. The judge sat straighter, jurors scribbling furiously, underlining names, drawing arrows. The defense whispered frantically, but there was nothing left to object to. The facts were plain, verified by logs, timestamps, and digital fingerprints. Hila continued, her voice a steady drumbeat of truth. The camera was pitched as a VIP-level safety precaution, but its true purpose was broader. It wasn't about protecting guests. It was about controlling narrative, keeping eyes on everyone, ensuring leverage if anything went wrong. Who had control over that leverage? Vance asked. Hila hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Technically Jay-Z, but only one person ever downloaded the backup copy. Who? Vance pressed, though the answer was inevitable. Sean Combs, Hila said, her voice flat but devastating. The room buckled, audible shock rippling through the gallery. Not screaming, just the weight of a courtroom realizing the man on trial hadn't just participated in the system, but monitored it, archived it, preserved it. Diddy's hands unclenched for the first time, his fingers trembling slightly, his suit now clinging to him like armor cracking under pressure. The prosecution sat down, their case not just made but cemented, their silence louder than any closing argument could have been. The trial didn't end that day, but it might as well have. The courtroom recessed, but no one moved, not immediately. Reporters lingered, their laptops glowing in the dim light, their fingers frozen above keyboards as they tried to capture a moment that felt bigger than words. Jurors filed out slowly, their faces heavy with the weight of what they'd seen and heard, their notepads clutched like lifelines. The judge, his robe rustling softly, retreated to his chambers, his expression grim but resolute. Diddy remained at the defense table, his lawyers whispering around him like vultures circling a wounded animal, their voices low but urgent. He didn't respond, didn't look up, his eyes still fixed on the table as if the truth had been etched there all along, waiting for him to read it. Outside, the courthouse steps were a circus. Media vans lined the street, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters shouting questions into the void, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of speculation. The story had gone nuclear, trending worldwide within hours. Hashtags like Chand Diddy trial and Chand Jay-Z footage exploding across social media, fans and critics alike dissecting every detail, every implication. But inside that courtroom, the noise didn't matter. What mattered was the silence. The silence of the women who'd been led upstairs, the silence of those who'd watched and said nothing, the silence of an industry that had thrived on secrets for decades. This wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about power, about privilege, about the architecture of silence that had shielded the untouchable for too long. Kayla Foster, Michelle Rivers, Ila Anderson, they weren't just witnesses. They were cracks in that architecture, voices that had finally dared to speak. And Jay-Z? His name hung over the trial like a specter, his silence louder than any testimony. His role, whether complicit, calculated, or coincidental, still undefined. Was he a savior, leaking the footage to expose a truth? Or was he a king protecting his throne, sacrificing a pawn to save his empire? The jury didn't know. The courtroom didn't know. The world didn't know. But as the gavel fell, one question burned hotter than all the rest. How many others knew? And what else lies hidden behind those locked doors? The trial wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a mirror held up to an industry, a culture, a world where power had been currency and silence had been its vault. And now that vault was open, its contents spilling out for all to see, and no one, not Diddy, not Jay-Z, not the jury, not the world, could look away.